Here's a sample of what you'll hear on this episode of Holistic Health Matters.
Your question should always be when a doctor gives you a diagnosis. For instance, you go in, you have high blood pressure, hypertension. Okay, doctor, why do I have high blood pressure? The description of what you've got is not a true diagnosis. What's causing the underlying problem? This high blood pressure is a symptom.
Welcome to the Holistic Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential in spirit, mind, and body so that you can pursue the abundant life more effectively. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 38. This episode is brought to you by my book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. Getting educated on natural and holistic health is time-consuming and can be expensive, not to mention overwhelming. I want to help you with that. My book will put you on the fast track to the vibrant health and vitality you've been looking for. By the way, many of my recommendations won't cost you a nickel. They're free because a lot of my message is simply aligning our lives more fully with the Word of God. That doesn't cost you anything. If you'd like to avoid overwhelm and get some biblically based holistic health information that you can implement right away, go to my website, davidsandstrom.com/book. You can learn more and pick up a copy today. If that doesn't work, you can go directly to Amazon. It's available there in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. This episode is part one of a two-part series with my conversation with Dr. Stephen Hotze. Dr. Hotze is an MD, and I'm always thrilled to have a guy like this on the show because he's trained in the traditional medical practice, but what he found was traditional medicine was not helping his patients much. In fact, he was intoxicating them with pharmaceuticals. So he decided to get an education on his own, and he became much more holistic. Now he has a holistic wellness center in Houston, Texas, and he's a great guy, very positive energy, super knowledgeable. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation with him. Again, this is part one of a two-part series. So let's jump right in. Today we have on the show Dr. Stephen Hotze. He's been married to his wife, Janie, for 51 years. They have 8 children and 24 grandchildren. He's a follower of Jesus Christ, and he's the founder of the Hotze Health and Wellness Center in Houston, Texas. His wellness center has helped over 31,000 patients get their lives back. It's his deepest desire to help you obtain and maintain health and wellness naturally so that you may enjoy a better quality of life, pure and simple. Dr. Hotze, welcome to the show.
David, glad to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you and with your listening audience.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. I'm curious, whenever I meet somebody that's in the medical profession but has a holistic mindset, how did you make the transition when, the short story, how did you make the transition from being a traditionally trained MD to a holistic health and wellness center?
I graduated from University of Texas Medical School here in Houston in 1976. And upon graduation, my dad held a banquet for me at the Houston Club downtown with family and friends, my wife and my brothers and sisters. And over dinner, he turned to me and he said, my dad was a very successful entrepreneur, engineer, and had a manufacturing business. He turned to me and said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Son, don't poison your patients like all the other doctors do. Do you understand me?" It was not a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command by my father. Don't poison your patients like all the other doctors do. Well, I was not really in medical school. I had a lot of questions about the medical profession and about the way they approach things, particularly about the overuse of pharmaceutical drugs, psychiatry, and all these things. I gravitated towards surgery because, as surgeons like to say, a chance to cut is a chance to cure. So I enjoyed doing surgery. And after being in a surgery program for a year, I went into emergency medicine. And there you're treating acute problems. You feel like you're making a difference in somebody's life, not just filling them up with drugs. You're treating everything from snake bites to gunshot wounds to car accidents. And so it's an acute problem, an acute situation. You get people stabilized or fix their problem and move them on. Well, once I went into family medicine back in the early 80s and occupational medicine, I, of course, used medication, pharmaceutical medication in my treatment. I also did surgery at the time. But one day, a little lady came in to see me in 1988, and she had been a guest of mine for several years, lived next door to a retirement center. And I said, Miss Jones, how are you feeling? She had a beautiful smile on her face, which none of my patients ever had when they came to see me. And she said, Dr. Hotze, ever since I threw away all that medicine you were giving me, I feel like $1 million. So I remembered all of a sudden Dad saying, so don't poison your patients like all the other doctors do. And this woman was smarter than me and all the other patients and all the other doctors. She knew that these drugs were poisons. And in fact, all pharmaceutical drugs are toxic. That's why you have to detoxify them. They're toxins. Toxins, by definition, are poisons. They all have an LD50. There's a dose at which any pharmaceutical drug you take, at a high enough dose, 50% of people that take that dose will die. So they're poisons. So I thought to myself, you know what? I need to do something different. And then shortly thereafter, my dad came to me with some chest pain. And I diagnosed him and told him, I said, Dad, you got angina. You know, we need to go in and we need to have that evaluated. We did. We went in and he had angioplasty. He had coronary artery arteriograms done. It showed that he had a blockage in his left anterior descending artery. And he went in for angioplasty, at which point they tore open the artery. Dying near bled to death, destroyed part of his heart. He had emergency surgery. And he lived, thank God. And got out of the hospital. 2 weeks later, after he's out of the hospital, he called me to the house and said, son, I said, yes, sir. Come over here. I want to talk to you. He was not in a good mood. My dad was 72 at the time. I went over and he said, he's pacing the floor. He goes, I don't know what the Sam Hill I was letting these doctors invade my body. It violated every engineering principle I know. I've got a calcified artery. You can't stretch a calcified artery. It's just going to fracture like the pipelines we work on. We were in the pipeline business. You have a fracture in the pipelines, you put pressure on the pipeline blows. That's what they did to my arteries. He said, read this article. He hands me a newsletter from Dr. Julian Whitaker out of California. I read the newsletter. It was all about heart disease. He said, what do you think? And Dr. Whitaker was natural approaches to health. He said, don't let the doctor invade your body. The situation at that time was if you had a heart attack and you had angioplasty, your chance of dying in the first year was 15%. If you had bypass surgery, your chance of dying was 5%. If you did nothing but lower your blood pressure, lose weight, exercise, take vitamins and minerals, keep your blood pressure under control, you had a 1% chance of dying. Don't let the doctors invade your body. So he said, what do you think about this? I said, Dad, I wish we would have tried it. He said, well, this doctor says I need vitamins. What do I need to take? I was like a deer in headlights. I said, Dad, I'm a doctor. What do I know about vitamins? And he said, He looked at me just looked at me. I can remember his eyes staring at me like it was yesterday. Son, would you find out? Now, I'm the oldest of 8, 7 boys. Love my dad. I said, I will. And I did. I went out and began to study natural approaches to health and began to adopt them into my practice. I started in allergy first. I went to Pan American Allergy Society, learned how to treat allergies. All these patients I saw with recurrent and chronic sinus, bronchitis, asthma, skin disorders, stomach problems. Turns out many of them had allergic disorders, and I could easily treat those naturally using allergy immunization therapy, initially injections and then sublingual drops under the tongue. So I adopted that, and I learned about vitamins and minerals there. I learned about good, healthy eating and how to eliminate yeast from the diet because people that were on antibiotics got recurrent and chronic yeast problems. I read Dr. Crook's book on the yeast connection. Started treating people because allergy patients routinely have infections and they're on antibiotics frequently. So they have yeast problems. Women get recurrent and chronic yeast infections. So began to treat for that. And then one thing led to another. When people didn't get well, one of my doctor buddies in 92, I started in allergy, treating for airborne allergies and food allergies, treating for yeast and treating with vitamins and minerals back in 1989 and 90. I set up as an allergy practice. In 92, a colleague of mine in allergy said, hey, Steve, some of your patients, you got a lot of female patients that have hypothyroidism. I said, I do? He said, yeah, you do. They've got autoimmune thyroiditis. They're making antibodies to the thyroid gland. I said, what do I do? Treat them. I said, how? I said, use Armour Thyroid. I said, really? Yeah. So I began to look into that and began to treat people. Sure enough, many of the women that we saw had signs and symptoms of low thyroid. And they had antibodies to their thyroid gland. We began to treat them. They had dramatic recoveries. That's great. And then we learned in 96, I learned about natural female hormone replenishment and replacement, natural sex hormones in females and in males, treatment of adrenal fatigue, And of course, then we added that onto the thyroid treatment. Then we started our eating program, a good healthy eating program, which we had adopted with the yeast-free eating program. So that was basically it. So we have people, our program is real simple. We treat for airborne and food allergies, treat for yeast, natural thyroid hormone supplementation when indicated, female and male hormone when indicated, treatment of adrenal fatigue, vitamin and mineral supplementation, and a nutritionally balanced eating and exercise program, helping people get on a path of health and wellness naturally.
Well, hats off to you, Dr. Hotze, for actually transitioning from that mindset that you're taught in medical school and actually finding out what works, what's actually going to help your patients.
Well, this is the key thing. What works? And how do you know what works? Well, you try it. I learned from other doctors. I didn't invent anything on my own. I just read and listened. I listened to a lot of patients who would come in. I learned about natural female hormones from a little lady that came into my office in 1996. I listened to a tape by Dr. John Lee out of California. I listened to that tape on natural progesterone, called Dr. Lee the next day, got his phone number serendipitously, called him on a mobile phone and said, where do I get this progesterone? How do I get it? He goes, you can get that in a compounding pharmacy. I said, what in the world's a compounding pharmacy? Now I own a compounding pharmacy. Now I own a vitamin store. So it's interesting. All the things that, that we do now, we've adopted, brought them in-house. My dad's adversity, in his adversity, there was a seed of greater or equal benefit. And my dad lived a great life. He lived to be 80. He died like he told me he'd die. He told me he was going to die right on the office working. And he did. Wow. The night before he died, I asked him how he was feeling. He said, son, I hadn't felt this good since I was 18. Yeah. Wow. He told me he was 65. He said, I'm going to die. I'm not retiring. I'm going to die right here on the job. And he did.
And he did. Yeah. Wow, that's something else. Well, you've got a couple of books, and I've read your book, Hypothyroidism, Health and Happiness. I thought it was awesome. I've got a couple of quotes from the book that I'd like to share, and I'd like you to share a few words and add to these quotes.
Sure.
On page 25, you say this: it all gets down to personal responsibility. Neither the state and the federal government, nor the insurance companies, nor your employer are responsible for your health. You and you alone are responsible. So could you speak to that? Speak to that for just a minute.
Sir, that says it all right there. Everybody, look, if you want to be healthy, then be healthy. Get healthy. If you want to be healthy, get healthy. It's your choice. You have to decide in your life, do I want to be a healthy person or not? Nobody is going to make you healthy. No drug that you're given will make you healthy. Nobody's sick because they have low levels of pharmaceutical drugs. You go to a conventional doctor, they're going to load you with pharmaceutical drugs to treat symptoms, bad symptoms, instead of addressing underlying problems. Your insurance company has no desire for anything but your money. That's just the way it is. The government wants to control you, and that's why they want to socialize medicine so they can absolutely control everybody, create fear in them, and you have to do whatever they say or you don't get your government medical care. Every person needs to take charge of their own health, and most Americans are driving down the health freeway on the wrong side of the road, coming up to an overpass, and a big 18-wheeler is going to roll into them and whack them, and they're going to either be killed instantly or they're going to be shattered and they're going to be laid up. My recommendation is everybody that's listening to this program, look at yourself in a mirror and say, I'm in charge of my health, and take charge of your health and invest in it. Turn yourself around on the health freeway, get on the right way, and get on a path of health and wellness naturally. That's all you have to do. If you do that, your life will change.
Amen.
Don't believe the propaganda that is thrown to you on the media. I don't watch TV, a hoot at all. I just don't watch it, haven't for years. Do I ever? Occasionally I've watched some. Maybe I've watched the election results roll in or something, but I don't let them brainwash me. Remember, when you watch TV, folks, that's called television. They're telling you something in that vision. They have a program. They're programming you into what to do. And if you want to be programmed in your life, that's what they do on television. And they have television's programs to program you in your thinking. So,
well, I would suggest that they also do that through the computer screen today as well.
They phones. Do, absolutely.
Same thing. Yeah. So here's another quote, Dr. Hotze. You say in your book, treating symptoms is just what the pharmaceutical industry encourages doctors and patients to do. The willingness of physicians to prescribe drugs to patients in order to mask symptoms rather than diagnosing the underlying cause of those symptoms has created a nation of legal drug addicts. So could you speak to that for a minute? So you've decided to make some improvements to your health and well-being. You're listening to shows like this where you can get information that can help take your health to the next level. The trouble is, getting educated and implementing effective strategies is time-consuming and can be expensive, not to mention overwhelming. That's why I wrote my book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. In my book, I've taken 20 years of research and experience as a natural and holistic health coach and distilled it down to what you need to know to maximize your health potential in spirit, mind, and body. It's my contention that we maximize our health potential by aligning our lives more fully with God's design for spirit, mind, and body. My book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health, will put you on the fast track to the vibrant health and vitality you've been looking for. By the way, many of my recommendations won't cost you a nickel. They're free because a lot of my message is simply aligning our lives more fully with the Word of God. That doesn't cost you a thing. If you'd like to avoid overwhelm and get some biblically based holistic health information that you can implement right away, go to my website, davidsandstrom.com/book. That's DAVIDSANDSTROM as in Mike.com/book, and you can learn more and pick up a copy today. If that doesn't work, you can go directly to Amazon. It's available there in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. Now let's get back to the show. The willingness of physicians to prescribe drugs to patients in order to mask symptoms rather than diagnosing the underlying cause of those symptoms has created a nation of legal drug addicts. So could you speak to that for a minute?
Sure. And guess who the drug pushers are? The doctors. They are bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. The pharmaceutical companies come in and leave them all their drugs. They don't have to think. The drug rep comes in. By the way, I've banned drug reps in my office. It has to be nearly 30 years ago. I won't even let them come into my office. We don't want anything to do with them. Does that mean I forever use any pharmaceutical drugs? Rarely do we. Occasionally, somebody has an infection routinely, we try to get them over it naturally using, maybe colloidal silver, vitamins and minerals. But if somebody's got a significant infection, we're gonna treat them. For instance, in this when somebody comes in with a flu and they've got bronchitis, or the COVID, which is a flu-like illness, and they got bronchitis. Well, that can turn into a secondary pneumonia very quickly. And routinely, if somebody had the flu syndrome, they got bronchitis, we're going to give them empirically put them on an antibiotic to prevent a secondary bacterial pneumonia from occurring. We put them on COVID medication, hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. We'll do that because we know they're antiviral, and we know that they help decrease the mortality rate or the illness rate, so people don't become near as ill if they get on these antivirals. So we'll use it in that case. But as far as giving long-term pharmaceutical drugs day-to-day, where there's blood pressure, statin drugs, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-inflammatories, we just don't do that. We just don't do it. Yeah. Now, there's always exceptions to a rule, but it's so rare, as rare as hen's teeth, that we ever give any of those medications. Nobody is sick because they have low levels of pharmaceutical drugs. That's just it.
Absolutely.
Here's what happens. Why do people get sick? Well, you and I both know the major reason one of the major causes of illness in America is what we eat. We eat lousy food. We eat processed food full of all kinds of chemicals. You just look on the package, so if it's packaged, canned, or boxed, you're going to get a lot of chemicals in that food that are going to poison your body. And, then you're going to eat a high carbohydrate diet as well. You're eating pizza, cookie cakes, fajitas, pies, the whole nine yards. You can eat corn products, rice products, potato products, all convert to sugar, highly inflammatory. That's going to lead to a host of problems. You can gain weight. You can get pre-diabetic. Then you can get diabetic. You're going to get coronary artery disease, inflamed arteries. You're going to get high blood pressure. You're going to get kidney disorders. You're going to get obesity. The whole nine yards, all from poor eating habits. The first and most important thing you can do is change your eating habits. And I recommend a keto-friendly eating program. Paleo or keto-friendly is very important. And cutting down on your simple carbohydrates dramatically, and in some cases eliminating for a period of time altogether. because they convert to sugar, which is highly inflammatory, which leads to our high incidence of coronary artery disease. So that's the first thing. The second thing, part of the reason people get sick is their hormone levels go down. Their thyroid, their testosterone, their female hormones, they decline as we age and become imbalanced. And that causes a host of health problems. They don't get enough vitamins and minerals and nutrients. And so they don't produce it. And because they don't get enough vitamins and minerals and nutrients, their body doesn't function at the cellular level like it should. Remember, the most important thing that your body does is produce energy. And the mitochondria, which are power plants that live within your cells. Every cell of your body has a generator in it called a mitochondria. It produces electrical energy. That electrical energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, if you can remember back in high school, the Krebs cycle, that ATP carries the electrons to the biochemical processes in the cell so they have energy to operate. If you are eating the wrong kinds of foods, if you're taking all this, you have low hormones and you don't have enough vitamins and minerals, well, then you're going to operate at a low energy level intracellularly, and your body's going to have a low metabolic rate, and all your organs will malfunction. They won't function well. So you're going to be sluggish. You're what we call a low voltage individual. So you go to the doctor, and that creates a host of symptoms: high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, you name it, heart disease. And so you go to the doctor, and what do? They poison you with drugs, so you get sicker quicker. Now you get worse. Instead, you got to take care of your health, get your weight down to an ideal body weight, get on vitamins and minerals that your body needs, replenish your hormones with natural bioidentical hormones, exercise. If you got allergies, treat that, and you'll be off to the races. You'll do fine. It's a simple program.
That's really good. That's really good. And I want to pause you right there. Let me interrupt. And I want to talk about drugs for a little bit. Here's another quote that I found that was great in your book. You say 100,000 hospitalized patients die annually in America as a result of taking doctor-prescribed, FDA-approved drugs in the correct dosage. That's equivalent to 725 jet airliners fully loaded crashing in 1 year. If that were to happen, there would be an outcry from Congress and the public. I make the exact same point in my book, and I actually use a larger number because you're just talking about properly prescribed drugs.
It is a larger number. In fact, iatrogenic illness, doctor-caused illness and deaths probably on the order of 1 million a year.
That's staggering.
There have been studies in places in the country where they've had doctor strikes for one reason or another. You know, the doctors were off for one, that worked in certain health clinics and all that. They had a dramatic decrease in deaths.
Yeah, there was one study in Israel where when doctors walked off the job with a strike, death rates plummeted by 50%. 50%. That's right. Staggering.
Now, listen, there's a book that was written by Dr. Sherry Rogers. Don't let your cardiologist kill you.
Yeah, I've read her stuff. She's good. She's really good.
She's great.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about polypharmacy. So I'm an airline pilot by trade, and we don't have to have everything in the airplane working in order to take that thing into the air. We have what we call a minimum equipment list. And if it's a light bulb burned out or some insignificant system, we can go without it. But when they make this list of components that can be inoperative, they only look at one at a time. So it's up to the pilot, the captain of that airplane, to say, well, okay, if I have an auxiliary power unit that's not working, there's one of my generator sources is missing. And then if I have a generator on an engine that's inoperative, then that creates an unsafe situation. But they do that with pharmaceuticals, in that they only approve pharmaceuticals one at a time. They don't mix them up.
Right.
But that's routinely what happens in doctors' offices, correct?
Exactly. And the studies haven't been done. Now, in the PDR physician desk reference, it'll say, or if you go online, it'll say, well, this drug, there's been some interactions between these one or two drugs. But they haven't done a study of all the drugs and all the interactions. It's impossible to do that, to have that kind of study. But just know this, that all drugs, by definition, are poison. And my philosophy is this: you cannot poison yourself to good health. Guess what? The philosophy of conventional medicine is we can poison you to good health. Have you ever heard a doctor say that? No. If I said that to a group in the medical society, we don't believe that. Well, then why do you give poisons to people? What do you mean? A drug is a poison. Well, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, listen, I went to medical school like you did. I took pharmacology in the first semester in medical school. Guess what? There's a chapter on Detoxification of pharmaceutical drugs. What does it mean to detoxify, doctor? Well, get rid of toxins. Yeah, get rid of toxins. So drugs are toxins. What's the definition of a toxin? Go to Webster's dictionary. Number one definition is poison. You're literally giving people poison. You can't poison yourself to good health. If people are sick, it's because they have a problem with one, they're not eating right, their hormones are out of balance, their immune system's unhealthy for one of those two, eating wrong, poor hormone balance or a decline, or decline of vitamin and mineral supplementation, not enough good vitamins and minerals. Routinely, those are three primary reasons people are sick. Now, they can have allergic disorders, which cause people to wear out their immune system as well. But these are the common things that, in lack of exercise, these are common things that cause people to get sick. It's not because they have low levels of drugs in their bodies. Drugs never make anybody well. Now, you say, well, if you had an infection, doesn't antibiotic help me get well? Well, antibiotic will kill a bacteria. Maybe an antiviral will kill a virus. Maybe. But it also causes secondary problems. It kills good and healthy normal bacteria. You can get yeast overgrowth. That causes compounds and problems. If you have to take antibiotics over and over again, antibiotics aren't making you well. All that does is identify that you have an unhealthy immune system. Why don't you ask your doctor, instead of getting me antibiotics, why don't you help me get my immune system healthy? What a novel idea. Right. Heard any talk about that on this COVID crisis. None of these government bureaucrats said a word about vitamins and minerals in building up your immune system. It was all about, we'll treat the symptoms and, we're going to get a vaccination for you one day. And that's how we're going to treat you.
Well, that's why I started the podcast back in the spring when we were in lockdown. I said to my wife, what this advice we're getting from the government is madness. All they're telling us to do is avoid, it's lockdown. Stay home, stay safe, wear a mask, social distance. They're not talking about strengthening your immune. They're not talking about getting a good night's sleep. They're not talking about spending some time in nature. They're not talking about doing something about your relationships, reaching out to some old friends and restoring some relational connectedness, because loneliness is a risk factor for all kinds of diseases.
You bet.
No one's talking about it. So I said, you know what? I'm starting a podcast. It's time. I've been wanting to do it for a couple of years now. So here we are. And I appreciate you being on the show. Here's another point I wanted to make about drugs. Now, drugs are useful at times, and I'm sure you would agree that they're great with emergencies. They're great with acute conditions. I'm not completely opposed to them. I'm not either. But you need to use them appropriately. But there is a marketing system in place behind pharmaceuticals that we should be aware of. When I was a pilot based in Orlando has a big convention industry. And we were saying goodbye to the passengers one day, and there was one 5'9", stunning late 20s woman walking off this plane after another. And I said to the male flight attendant, I said, man, there's a lot of beautiful women on this plane. What is there, a beauty pageant going on? And he said, no, it's a pharmaceutical rep convention.
Hello.
And that's where doctors get their advice on pharmaceuticals, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I noticed a big change when I started in practice in the 1980s in my own personal practice. I graduated in 76 from medical school. So I've been in practice 44 years. And I noticed, by the late 80s, all the old men that were in there that had been detailing me on drugs, all of a sudden these lovely, young, bright, articulate, attractive young women were coming in who had no background at all in medicine at all, or any. They were just trained salespeople. And of course, it's
very charismatic.
Sex sells, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
That's what they were doing.
So I want to talk about one more thing that the medical industry kind of gets wrong. They're trying. There's a lot of well-intentioned people in that industry, but one of the things they'll do is take your collection of symptoms that you're presenting in their office and give it a Latin name and call it a diagnosis. For instance, fibromyalgia. And you say in your book, your doctor might say, you have fibromyalgia. And you say, wow, that sounds like something really ominous. At least I know I have a real problem. You think. But what your doctor did was translate your complaint into Latin and describe joint muscle pain and pass it off as a diagnosis.
Right.
That's a pretty common practice, isn't it?
Sure it is. You go in there with severe headaches, you've got migraines, you go in and they call it, they'll attribute your symptoms. Go in and say you've got joint pain. My joints hurt me. Well, you have arthritis. What does arthritis mean in Latin? It means inflammation of the joint. Duh. So all the terminology, you've got, I've got heart pain. Well, you have cardiomyopathy, or you've got coronary artery disease. They tell you they tell you the result, but they don't tell you the cause. Your question should always be when a doctor gives you a diagnosis. For instance, you go in, you have high blood pressure, hypertension. Okay, doctor, why do I have high blood pressure? The diagnosis, the description of what you've got is not a true diagnosis. What's causing the underlying problem? This high blood pressure is a symptom. What's causing the high blood pressure? Fatigue is a symptom. Recurrent chronic infections is a symptom. What's causing your symptoms? You're short of breath. You have asthma. Why do I have asthma? What's causing the asthma? My stomach, I've got stomach pain, and I've got reflux, and I got burning in my stomach. You have gastroesophageal reflux disorder. Okay. You're telling me what I've got in a medical term or Latin term. What exactly is causing the problem?
They don't have answers.
They routinely, if you ask them what's causing the problem, they'll look at you like cross-eyed, like you've got them in deer in headlights. They don't like that. It puts them on the spot. So what you have to do, and what we do here at the Hotze Health and Wellness Center, is we focus on, okay, tell us your symptom. Let's talk about the symptom. Let's listen and see if we can put together a diagnosis, a cause. A diagnosis tells you the cause of the symptoms or of the signs that you present with. Something's causing it. What's causing it? And usually it's very, very simple.
All right. I think that's a good place to stop. I don't want to make this episode too long because Dr. Hotze can get pretty technical, pretty deep, pretty fast. But next week, I'm going to ask him why hypothyroidism is so difficult to diagnose and so difficult to get treatment for. And he really brings it with that conversation. So I highly encourage you to tune in next week. And please don't forget, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. My book will put you on the fast track to the vibrant health and vitality you've been looking for. If you'd like to avoid overwhelm and get some biblically based holistic health information you can implement right away, go to my website, davidsandstrom.com/book, and you can learn more and pick up a copy today. If that doesn't work, you can go directly to Amazon. It's available there in paperback, Kindle, and Audible. For more, go to davidsandstrom.com. In the show notes for each episode, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned, as well as a full transcript with timestamps that you can download for free. In addition, I always include a content upgrade with each show, which is a free download that is designed to help you go deeper with that subject. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk with you next week. Be blessed.